Hello, welcome to a special episode on Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon set the stage for the attack on the deep state today in a series of proposals he made in the early 1970s to reorganize the federal government. It is well worth looking at these proposals and the philosophy behind them in order to avoid the mistakes that were made in the past and to benefit from some of the insights which were profound at the time. I'm Merrick F. Masters, Professor of Business Emeritus, commentator and podcaster. You can find me at my email address and on my YouTube channel. Presidents, particularly conservative presidents, face deeply rooted challenges in trying to implement change. The problem that they face is bureaucratic unresponsiveness. Bureaucratic unresponsiveness manifests itself in several ways, but suffice it to say that more than five decades ago, as President, Richard Nixon expressed strongly held views comparable to more recent efforts to deconstruct the administrative state, consolidate bureaucracy, and purge the deep state. He distrusted the State Department and carved it out of serious involvement in policy making in such matters as the Vietnam War, the opening of China, and relations with the Soviet Union. He was distrustful of both the CIA and the FBI. Nixon also believed that the federal bureaucracy was improperly structured, inefficient, and unaccountable. On top of this, Nixon was convinced that the bulk of the civil service opposed him and his political agenda. Tensions between presidents and the civil service have been long-standing and multi-layered. Concerns about the responsiveness of the administrative state or its unresponsiveness to presidential initiatives have evolved into attacks against the so-called deep state, which is a term that has become vogue recently to refer to a segment of the administrative state considered purposely impervious to presidential direction regardless of political party. It's a cabal between those in government and outside who want to perpetuate a certain status quo. There are multi-levels of unresponsiveness in the bureaucracy that require alternative remedies. They vary in scope and malignity. First, there's simple bureaucratic inertia, hidebound, rule-bound, technically abstruse, and organizationally fragmented government that makes it difficult to act efficiently or effectively. Second, competence. I think that's a growing problem with knowledge and skill deficits, inadequately trained and equipped staff, and sheer mismanagement. Economic capture is the third level. It refers to external interests that capture organizations and regulatory agencies based on their economic interests in the subject matter or domain of the federal entity. Ideological capture is more widespread. It's entrenched ideologically partisan employees that pervade in broad domains of policymaking and implementation. These policymakers typically are of a leftist democratic orientation, believe in bigger government and more government regulation of the private lives and the economy. The deep state is perhaps the most malignant of all. It's a power-based set of officials entrenched in networks with close ties to supportive external and economic and political interests that run across the globe. Nixon attempted to address what he considered to be the problem of federal bureaucracy hobbling elected leadership. It resulted in a major effect, that is, an undemocratic government. As Nixon said in one of his messages to Congress in 1971, perhaps the most significant consequence of scattered responsibility in the executive branch is the hobbling effect it has on elected leadership and therefore on the basic principle of democratic government. Basically, the unresponsiveness of the state, which varies in terms of degree and intensity, is undemocratic. Nixon expounded upon his philosophy and his efforts to change the nature of government in a series of messages which he made in the early 1970s at a cabinet meeting held on June 29, 1971, a few weeks after the revelation of the Pentagon Papers. The account of the cabinet meeting, which started at 8 a.m., was provided by H.R. Haldeman, Nixon's then chief of staff, and is posthumously published, the Haldeman Diaries. What Nixon said, he basically, to paraphrase, said that the administrative state has a life and mind of its own, loyal to its particular version of government. And Nixon, quoted by Haldeman, said at the cabinet meeting, "Down in the government are a bunch of SOBs. There are some in the civil service who are dedicated, but many who are out to get us. We've checked and found that 96% of the bureaucracy are against us." Nixon pointedly said to the cabinet members in attendance, "We have yet to fire one of these people." According to Haldeman, Nixon finished his 30-minute statement to the cabinet, and then he just got up and walked out. An important footnote: Nixon had a plan, as I mentioned, to consolidate and downsize the federal bureaucracy, on which he had worked diligently in the early 1970s and renewed his effort after his landslide election in 1972, in which he attempted to get ready to restart his efforts to reform the government with this landslide victory behind him in 1973. But his ability to execute his plan, or even partial elements thereof, was a major casualty of Watergate. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thank you, and stay tuned for more on Richard Nixon through my regular series, Nixon's the One, a story of his comeback in the 1960s to win the presidency in 1968. Thank you, and have a good day. Just a footnote here, you can find out a little bit more about me on this slide. I'm a professor of business, and some other aspects of my interests are provided in this slide. Thank you.